and welcome to Jam Toast with me, Vidyaa Prakash. I'm with Robin Staps of the Ocean in India. So how was the tour, Robin?
It's been amazing. It's been really good so far. We did 5 shows. Started off in Delhi and then did Mumbai, Bangalore, Guwahati and Hyderabad. And yeah, it's been great. We didn't really know what to expect from this tour. We've only ever been to India once before, which was under difficult circumstances. So yeah, I'm happy that this time it went down very well, and especially the Mumbai and Bangalore shows were really good.
You had to curate, I'm sure it would have been fun curating a set list for the Indian audience this time. How was it different from last time in musicality-wise?
I have to think when we were here the last time. I think it was 2014. So that was mainly, I think we were playing our previous album Pelagial in its entirety, which is how that album was meant to be performed live. So for the whole album cycle, we basically did that. This time around, we have a new album out titled Phanerozoic 1. So we're mainly playing tracks off that record, but we've also thrown in a couple of older tracks. So there's still like 2 or 3 Pelagial tracks in the set list, and a heliocentric track and a Precambrian track. So it's a pretty mixed set list.
That's amazing. So tell me about Phanerozoic and how it was recording this album.
It was different from our previous record in many ways. Pelagial really was a studio record. It was like it was basically like written and recorded, and only afterwards the whole thing was finished we started thinking about how to do that live. With Phanerozoic, we really rehearsed for the first time I think ever in the history of this band. We actually got together for a month in January last year.
That was after a break of 2 years, right?
Yeah. We took a bit of time off in 2016 and 2017. Pelagial came out already in 2013, so we did a lot of touring on that record. In the last 2 years, we've been taking it a bit slow. We still did a South America tour, but not really much, because everyone wanted to do some different things for a while, and also I was very active with my label, Pelagic Records, and Paul, our drummer, also works for the label, so that was the reason why we weren't so active with the Ocean. But then, yeah, we came back and we actually rehearsed and really fine-tuned details and worked on transitions and tried everything out in the rehearsal space before we recorded it. And that's what makes this record feel a bit more immediate, I think, and more like a band effort as opposed to like a composed record like the previous ones. And yeah, the recordings were great. We went to Iceland to track drums.
Yeah, I heard that you recorded, and partly in Iceland and partly in Berlin.
Exactly, yeah. And then the mix was done in Sweden, and especially that Iceland chapter was just amazing. We always like to take ourselves out of our known environment when we record. It helps creativity, and it helps to feel a bit disassociated in a positive way from all the distractions at home, and so that was a great call to make the record, or to start the process that was the making of this record in Iceland, actually.
With this album, you have sort of redefined your sound again. So what would you describe the Ocean sound as at this point in time?
I usually leave that up to people like you.
To interpret it? Yeah. I'm sure you have a lot of curious interpretations anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I think this album kind of reconciles the Precambrian era of the band. Precambrian was a record we released in 2007, and it was the last record before Loic, our current vocalist, joined the band. And it's still a record that a lot of our fans really like. We just did a 10th anniversary tour last year, played some shows with it, and the new record connects to that record both conceptually and musically as well. While on the other hand, there is Loic on it. So, it's kind of like a reconciliation between the older Ocean and the newer Ocean that started with like heliocentric. I think by that, or in that, it is probably closest to the vision I've always had of this band. We spent a lot of time working on the vocals this time, right. Loic and me.
And Loic is from Switzerland, so that would have been quite a challenge trying to, getting together. And
you mean logistically?
Logistically, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're used to that. He's been living in Switzerland ever since he joined the band, and that was almost 10 years ago now. Also, Matthias, our bass player, lives in Stockholm, and the rest of us lives in Berlin. Right. So we are quite spread out. Right. But flights are cheap in Europe, so it's it's manageable. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. And we were never a band that rehearses like every week at fixed times and hours. We usually get together before a tour or before making a record, and then we rehearse every day for a couple of weeks, and then we don't see each other for like 3 months, so we're that kind of band.
But when it comes together, it really comes together.
Yeah, exactly, and then it's quite intense, yeah.
So I'm sure like going all the way back, tracing your journey all the way back, the ocean would have probably been inspired by an ocean. So which one was that?
Well, the ocean in general has been an influence for me ever since, or a source of inspiration ever since I was a child, basically.
Right, the vastness of it.
Yeah, and just like I always loved sitting close to the shore of the sea and looking at the waves. And we had a boat when I was a kid, and I spent quite a lot of time like somewhere close to the ocean. I also nearly drowned as a kid twice, so I also saw or got to experience the angry side of the sea. And it's always just been something that has been a source of inspiration for me. And our past 4 records, they were all made in a house close to the sea. And it's like as soon as I get there, I just get into writing mode, and I get a lot of inspiration from the sea and being close to it. So yeah, if you ask which ocean, well, that would be mostly the Mediterranean. Wow. I have to see. Wow. More of a peaceful, quiet ocean, but yeah, it can also get quite violent.
Right. Oh, wow. That's great to know. So over the years, what were the other influences that came into the band, in terms of sound, in terms of, different, you've had quite a, changing, like the Ocean was the Ocean Collective. So you've had different musicians coming in. So the sound has evolved as well with time.
Yeah, it definitely has. Initially, when I started out, I grew up as a hardcore kid in the early 90s, listening to bands like Unbroken, Rorschach, Groundwork, later New Roses, and the Swans were always a band that I loved a lot. Then it kind of like diversified in my 20s, and I was listening to a lot of soundtrack music and a lot of also classical music and totally different stuff. So it's always been like a very vast pool of influences that I've drawn upon. And it has evolved over the years because my own listening habits evolved. Lately, I've been listening to a lot more electronic music, and also new members came and left. So that always has brought in, of course, like a fresh breeze to some degree and different perspectives. Exactly. However, I have always been the main songwriter in the band, and also on the new record, I wrote all of the tracks myself. So the other guys, they're not really that involved with the actual writing. They do now interpret the songs on their respective instruments quite freely. So I used to program really all the drums and then had a drummer who played it exactly like that. Now Paul approaches that a lot more freely, and I trust him as a drummer, and I don't need to program every single fill, so there's a lot more freedom in that regard. But the actual songwriting process is still something I do alone at home. We're not a band that meets in the rehearsal room and jams out riffs and then we don't have that moment of spontaneity. It's all very, it's composed music still.
So there's, this is like a very personal question. I really love the song Ordovicium, the glaciation of Gondwana, which is of Phanerozoic. And I think that's a very interesting song. And for me, I hold that song dear to me. So what was behind that song? What's the story behind that song?
Well, I have to give you a bit of a broader answer first. So Phanerozoic, the title of the new record, is the time that we currently still live in. It started 550 million years ago, right after the end of the Precambrian, and it still carries on. And it saw the evolution of plant and animal life on Earth. And so the whole record is basically a concept record about Earth's history. And all the song titles are making reference to subordinate eras within the Phanerozoic. So the Ordovician is an era that was in the early Paleozoic, a period that is in the early Paleozoic era, which is part of the Phanerozoic eon. So that's the way it goes. So yeah, so all the song titles make reference to these periods, and obviously the lyrics are not approaching the subject in a literal way, because there was a time long before humans were on Earth, and if lyrics are to be having an impact and are to be emotional, they somehow have to address human issues. So we approach the lyrics in a bit of a meta way, and every song still makes reference to these geological times, but the lyrics are talking about human issues.
Right.
And that specific song is a song about disappointment with a long-term friend that I have been with, and that I've also had a business together with, and gone through very difficult times together. And it's really a hate song in a way. I think it's the most aggressive track on the record. But yeah, it's good. It's good to vent yourself, you know.
I'd like to know what is coming up in 2019 in terms of what you're writing and tours.
Well, we have the second part of Phanerozoic coming out, but that's not going to happen until early 2020, most likely. It is already recorded, the drums and the guitars and all the extra instruments, so we only need to still record bass and vocals. So we will do that sometime this year, but we don't really know when, because our schedule is already quite full. So in May, June, we will probably continue working on the record. Then we have a lot of summer festivals confirmed. Summer Breeze, Hellfest, Oya Festival, and Brutal Assault. A lot of festivals coming up. And then in the fall, we're looking at touring the US in September, October. And then there will probably be a bigger European tour where we will be a special guest on, happening in like November, December. And then it's getting cold again in Europe, and that's a good time to come back to India. But probably not next year, but the year after. We're looking at definitely coming back here. So next winter, we're probably going to South America.
That's great.
That's the plan.
Oh, have a great one. It was great talking to you, Robin. Thanks again.
Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye. See you again.
Eyes on the wall.